Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to a bit of a different video today where we're looking at a new dev diary that just dropped for 1.9 that is a trade rework. So the developers are completely overhauling and changing how trade functions in Victoria 3 for 1.9. We're gonna see how this goes. I've never done this kind of video before, but I figure I really love trade and I would be discontent with myself. I'd radicalize if I missed the opportunity to talk about trade. Now, a lot of people don't like how trade works, and apparently the developers have decided to agree with that because they're completely ripping out the old system and replacing it. I personally really do enjoy trade, but I do agree with many of the players that it could use a good rework and a good overhaul, and that appears to be what we're getting here. So to tab over very quickly to a game I have ready for you here. How trade currently works in Victoria 3. We have turned off the noise here just so we can focus. You set up trade routes with specific countries. Those trade routes can be an import or an export for a good, and it will grow if it can make enough trade revenue for the next level, presuming it has convoys. If it wouldn't make money off of it, then the trade route won't grow. Trade route levels cap out at level 100, and while you can get an increase to the amount of trade through free trade per level with the increase to trade route volume, trade routes essentially cap out at level 100, and after that, if you want to be exporting more goods, you have to export to another country, or just take over half of the world and try to do it that way and just completely turn the trade system off because you've dominated half of the globe. That is how trade currently works. If you run out of convoys, you can't trade any further. If you cap out on all your levels, you can't export more grain to the rest of the world. Stuff like that. That is how trade essentially functions, and it's all manual. The player has to set it up all the time for their country. Of course, if someone embargoes you, it does stop you from trading with them, so that's fun. Now, tabbing back over to the dev diary here. Never done this before, so bear with me. They are changing that now. We are now going to be getting world markets with trade centers. The trade centers are still in the game, but the world market, if you've played Victoria 3, is making a return. It is very much world in progress, but you can think of this as completely separate from regular national markets. So as we can see here on this little picture that they've given us of the world market that's world in progress, we can see various exports and imports that various countries are doing. And we can tell by these little flags from my guess here is that, America is one of the top 2 exports of fabric. Britain is one of the top 2 exporters of dye. Brazil is one of the top 2 exporters of coffee way down here. So my guess here is that these flags are showing you who is currently the top 2 exporters and importers, respectively, of various goods. That's a nice little touch. That is a very nice little touch there. And this is where all trade will take place autonomously. So trade is going to have a lot less manual labor requirement, but it doesn't completely get rid of that manual labor. It just makes it easier for you. Because as I mentioned here, the trade centers are still the principal drivers of trade. But instead of them appearing whenever a trade route is created, you now build trade centers to get trade capacity in states. That then lets the states trade with the world market. So now your states will be doing the trading with the world market as long as they have trade capacity from trade centers that are built. And since we can build trade centers in 1.9, according to the dev diary, my assumption here is that you're going to be able to automate the production of trade centers. Essentially that your private investment pool can build trade centers, which then makes me wonder if they're going to overbuild on trade centers. I hope not. I'm sure it's going to take the profitability into account, and if expanding it would just crash the whole system. It does say that trade uses local state prices, though. So while that does bypass mapping, making it inefficient in certain areas, it does mean that if we go back over to our game here really fast, let's say we're on 1.9 right now and we can build trade centers. If we build a trade center in California, it's going to be very good at exporting cotton here, for example. So say we built a trade center in California, we're exporting cotton to the global market. it's going to be very good at exporting cotton, but it's going to be absolutely terrible at exporting coal. My guess here is that if we built the trade center in California, we would never see California export coal ever because it can't. Now it may import coal, which is that's a completely different thing I'm realizing now. If every state will be able to trade with the world market, does that mean Texas can export coal and California imports coal, which partially bypasses the entire thing about local prices and market access price impact? That might be interesting. That's something to consider. But that is my new understanding with trade. So Nebraska, if you built trade centers here, it could export oil, it could export grain. Any urban buildings you hear, it could export tools and import steel or rubber. Each state would be able to conduct those trades because it's, as I said in the dev diary, it's based on the local market, the local price for the market, rather than your national market price. So that does present a couple of questions. This is kind of the current mock-up they have for the trade centers. I don't know if we can kind of scroll down to see beyond this. Does the trade system here now work like financial districts where you can scroll down to see more individual information? I'm not sure, but it does look like it tells you the imports and exports they are doing up here in this to-do user interface, which is nice. And I'm guessing with trade capacity, if it isn't maxed out yet, they can still expand the routes or add new routes. It actually just say here that it still has plenty of free trade capacity in the notes above. Maybe I should have read that. So trading in trade centers happens automatically with weekly trades. Oh, okay, I see. So each weekly trade lets them make one adjustment per trade route. So the more higher levels you have, the more weekly trades they can do, the more capacity, the more trade advantage they have. And you can now influence trade centers through tariffs and subventions. So tariffs, you'll know, it's a tax on the good whenever it's being imported or exported from the market. That's something we're all pretty familiar with. Subventions are essentially government subsidization. So think of it as like an incentive. So say we want our trade centers to be importing iron, we could use a subvention to pay them to import iron, which will incentivize them to do that import of iron because it's going to be more profitable due to the government paying them to do it. So that is something very, very fun. And trade centers are not reliant on convoys, which, as I mentioned earlier, current system, trade is reliant on convoys. You run out of convoys, trade routes don't grow anymore. They're now saying trade centers don't rely on convoys, but they rely on purchasing merchant marines, which is a new type of goods created at ports, which are no longer government-only buildings. Oh, I like that. I like that because it means you can now build up ports in your subjects. So no longer does Britain have to suffer all of its subjects only having level 1 ports everywhere while it's trying to have enough convoys to keep the economy growing. Because now, since they are not government-only buildings, that means you can go ahead and build them and privatize them. Or just keep owning them nationally. The great... Anyway, I'm deviating. Right now, the amount of merchant marines is consumed by a static level, but they might make it dependent on geographic distance to trade partners. So that sounds like they're still doing a lot of min-maxing. Oh, you know what? That answers the question I just had earlier. This is still the Brandenburg Trade Center. We can look at a detailed import-export, as well as the owners, vacancies. Okay, this is nice. I like this. I really do like this, and judging from this, it organizes them by highest to lowest in terms of volume, which is very nice. So they're saying that we can see revenue, price difference, relative trade advantage, principal trade partner. So again, this makes sense. Qing and Britain are lead exporters of dye early on. So the world market location, as far as they've stated, it's kind of sort of hidden. It's technically in the ocean, but it also isn't, from what I've understood with the world market location. It's a little, I want to say confusing, but not really. In the sense it's just kind of the global market and they can't really tag it to a specific state. Market areas are chunks of a map consisting of a number of states that are all connected by lands or straits. Spanish market, Spain, Cuba, Puerto Rico, so on and so forth. In order to trade at the world market, a market area must have at least one port, at which point a world market hub will be established. When there are multiple ports in a market area, the hub is chosen based on factors like GDP and port level. So they can move around. That's interesting. I suppose that's fine. Because I'm thinking if you're going to convoy raid to try to cut someone off from the world market, as long as you're convoy raiding around their core marketplace, you can probably cut them off still. That is something I'm wondering how will convoy raiding in the world market work since trade is no longer reliant on convoys. I'm not too sure how that's going to work, but I'm going to operate on the assumption that convoy raiding will still destroy world market access. Now, if you are landlocked, like say you're Switzerland, that does build a very big issue because they put a limit to how much you could trade by land, and now suddenly you have to trade in the world market by sea only, which is a bit of an issue. They are saying you can negotiate transit rights with a foreign nation in order to be able to trade through their world market hubs. So that's interesting. So yeah, as Switzerland, you could negotiate transit rights with Austria, Prussia, France, whoever you're bordering really, to use one of their market hubs. I feel like that's going to make you vulnerable to them being convoy rated, but they said they're going to talk about the world market hubs in a later dev diary. Oh yeah, cover subjects such as blockades. There we go. Okay. Well, the world market exists in sea. That doesn't mean we simply ignore exports, assume they get loaded onto a ship. Not all trade partners are equal, and it makes little sense to give the bulk of your clothes imports from an overseas partner if your domain can be met by a closer. Okay, so they are really tracking trade here. They are really tracking where it comes and goes, which makes me think if the U.S. is exporting over half of the world's fabric and they've embargoed you, you're probably gonna have a bit of a tough time importing fabric. Trade advantage. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling up and down here. So let's see, trade advantage. I've already explained that there's world market price, each good, which is high when imports exceed exports. So we know how that works. Imports, exports, and pricing. We all know that. It works on state price now. The world market price is the average price for imported and exported goods, while the actual price is modified by a trade center's relative trade advantage to its competitors. Wait. As an example, a trade center and God, I'm gonna butcher this. I'm gonna get so dumped on here. Lancashire will have a certain amount of trade advantage for exporting fabric, which will be different from its trade center. Wait. A certain amount of trade advantage for exporting fabric. I don't think you can grow Wait, you can't grow fabric there, can you? Unless you're using livestock ranches. Hang on. Nope. I'm getting flamed, so we're bringing the dev diary with us. Yeah. You can only get fabric if you make a livestock ranch here. I'm not sure why they're using fabric as the example. It would be better if they used what is it here? Coal? Because you get 100 levels of coal here, and there's a bonus to coal mines in the coal field here. So allow me to reword this a little bit to help it make more sense, maybe. So the trade center in Lancashire will have a certain amount of trade advantage for, say, exporting coal, which will be different from its trade advantage in exporting coal. Oh, I should read ahead. I understand. They meant to say for importing fabric, which will be different from its trade advantage in exporting coal, or... Oh, okay. No, I understand. I'm sorry. The dev diary's fine. I'm an idiot, and I'm gonna leave that in the video because I need to show that I can be wrong about things. I understand what the developers are saying here now. Basically, it's going to be terrible at exporting fabric, but it's going to be great at exporting coal, and the person doing this video should read ahead before he blunders his way into obscurity. And then it mentions how it's different from its trade advantage in importing either fabric or coal. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So higher relative advantage means better price, which means the trade center makes more money off of it. The average price on imports and exports is always equal to the world market price. So any improvement on prices the trade center gains always comes at the expense of its competitors. So yeah, high advantage equals better price. The developers made this correctly. The power of editing is not in my fingertips, so we're just gonna live with that. We're just gonna live with that and move on. Basically, high trade advantage is great. It makes it worth more for the trade center. Note that numbers here don't currently add up due to a bug. Ooh, we do love bugs, don't we? We do love bugs. So interacting with the world market is very autonomous, but we still have our trade law, which now appears to decide our tariff and subventions maximums. So like how much we can do it. Mercantilism, it looks like is being changed to where you now get a disadvantage on importing, but you get an advantage on exporting. Does that make sense? I'm guessing isolationism is obvious. I don't know about protectionism. I guess you just get a lot of maximum on tariffs, and then free trade. It's not going to give you volume anymore, or would it still give you volume? I don't know. But yeah, they're using Sweden as an example. I wonder why. Where you can produce a lot of iron for export. This maximization trade advantage can be done in a number of ways. Signing trade agreements with key importers or squeezing the competition by unequal treaties on them. Unequal treaties, that sounds familiar. So it sounds like trade agreements are still useful because you're trading with the world market now instead of specific countries. It sounds like with trade agreements, you do get an additional trade advantage, but you want to be doing that with key importers, not just anyone. So that might make your trade partners a little more interesting in certain games. Or maybe not. Who knows? You might still want a trade agreement with Britain for all their dye and to sell them tea. But yeah, here are subventions that we talked about earlier. How you're paying the trade centers money. So it is working exactly how I described it. You can basically incentivize them to import and export specific goods with this by paying them for it. So that's very interesting there. But actually, that means completing Brazil's coffee journal entry should be a lot easier because now you can just pay trade centers to export it to the world market as long as you don't go bankrupt doing that. You probably will. And they are giving us a screenshot of the world market before they kind of sign off on us here. We did have one very early on, but this is a more built up one where they have a lot of oil trade going on right now. Apparently, at some point in this game they're using, Italy became a top exporter of opium. I'm very curious as to how that happened. Mexico became a top exporter of fabric. That is most curious. And apparently, both America and Russia are exporting automobiles by several thousand. I don't think the AI is going to be better with the economy in 1.9 than it is in 1.8, but some of these numbers are a little interesting. Looking at oil, rubber, and automobiles. I see the merchant marines here, considering the MM over the ship by the thousands. Apparently they're very cheap, so buy one while you can. Oh, was it a Belgian game? I'm guessing this must have been a Belgian game because Belgium is apparently the largest importer of God knows what. Oh, this is nice. I like this a lot. You can see a bunch of the big markets as well as their imports and exports. Apparently, Belgium is importing a lot of iron and coal and oil, which is funny if we assume it's only two states still. It probably isn't. God knows how their game went here. I do like to see that Britain is importing opium, and considering we can see Orison on here as well, chances are the East India Company collapsed at some point, so Britain has to import its opium now, which is very funny to me. Brazil, top export coffee, tea, makes sense. They are going to be coming back on March 31st on Monday, so that is only a couple of days away to talk about the next expansion pass and what's coming next. So that should be fun. We'll see how that is going to be. I think, in my opinion, my personal opinion, this could be a very good change to trade overall. I am someone who likes the current system in Victoria 3, but does think it needs a rework. And I do think this is the kind of rework that we want. because you still have a lot of control over trade if you want it with tariffs and subventions. But if you want it to be autonomous and you just don't want to deal with it, this is going to give you exactly that. It doesn't take away the agency from the player, but it allows the player to make it a very hands-off approach if they want to. And then I just want to do a very small apology for when I was talking out of my mouth earlier about the trade advantage. I can't find it now. Where's fabric? I'm just gonna look for it very quickly. This right here, yes. When they were talking about using the example of exporting fabric in comparison to exporting coal. I just wanted to apologize for that again. This is a good example on why we read ahead and then talk about something instead of assuming we know what we're talking about. I think it'll be great. You could have the government controlling all the trade centers and making money off it. It could be another private thing. You can make it completely automated. You can still control a ton of it. And they're essentially getting rid of the main limiting factor on trade, which is just the trade level cap and the convoy limit. They didn't explicitly say that they're getting rid of the trade level cap, but I assume if they're going to get rid of the convoys, they probably are removing the trade level cap. Even if they're not removing it, even if it's still 100 per level, if it's 100 per level per resource per state, that's still a massive increase to the amount of potential trade you can do in the long run. Because before you could let's hop back over to our game really quick here that I have horribly muted. Just really quick, because right now you can only trade, say, 100 levels of paper to Britain. But now as Mexico, if you still have the level cap, you could do 100 paper levels per state with 100 trade centers in each if they only do paper as a weird example. So that's still a massive increase to the amount of trade you could do as, like, say, France, Austria, Russia here, and all of your rye farms. It gives you a lot of potential still. But if they have removed the level cap as well and you can go over 100 levels, then trade has technically the only limit on trade is the number of trade centers that have been built and the amount of trade going on, which sounds like a very good change to me. Either way, it's still fantastic. I do like this, though, how Britain is almost half of the world's exports, which is very funny. I think that is going to do it. I hope going through this dev diary and kind of giving my thoughts kind of helped. This is the first time I've done this kind of thing, as it's probably clearly evident by how nervous I am and how poor this has been. I think this is going to be a very good free part of the update. I like what we're seeing overall here. I think it's currently in a good spot to kind of show off to people, to kind of say, hey, this is what we're working on, this is kind of how it's going to work, this is what we're thinking. You know, and here's the progress we've made so far. It's not done yet, but you know, we're getting there. I think this would be very fun. I would love to do a game over this at some point of just not conquering any new territories, not getting any new subjects, just trading as like Belgium or maybe just Russia that never expanded. That could be some very fun game ideas. Let me know what you thought about this, and do tell me where I could improve on these kinds of videos, because I definitely need to improve on this kind of thing. And I will see you all next time.